Well, hello, everybody. Welcome once again. This is Syracuse Football Postgame presented by Krause Health. We're live here on the Syracuse Football Orange Facebook page. We're live on YouTube, live on Twitter as well. You can watch the show later on YouTube, on our social media channels where the video archives automatically. You can also see it embedded in my recap on syracuse.com. And we are coming off the heels here of a pretty pathetic loss, frankly. Syracuse football, no shows on senior night and loses to Florida State. 38-3 is the final at the JMA Wireless Dome tonight against Florida State. And a game that Syracuse was outplayed in all three phases of the game. And the fact they even got 3 points on the board is pretty amazing at this point. Florida State has won 3 straight. Syracuse has lost 4 straight. And boy, is this 2020 season starting to just go off the rails a little bit here. I mean, Syracuse started this season 6-0. No matter what happens in the next 2 games, they will finish out the 2022 season against Wake Forest and then Boston College. Wake Forest, who as we speak is giving North Carolina all they can handle in a high-scoring game. Boston College, who pulled an upset today on NC State, a team that Syracuse beat a couple games back. And you have to think to yourself, how in the world did Syracuse beat NC State? And ever since that play against Clemson, that has just put a hex on this team. That sideline play, the quarterback hits, one called on Syracuse, one not called for Syracuse in that stretch. This team has just fallen apart since then. Injuries have piled up for sure, but even tonight, you got your starting quarterback back, Garrett Schrader, not effective. Even when Sean Tucker broke off some runs in this game, penalties brought him back. Syracuse had 10 penalties in this game against Florida State. They were missing tackles left and right. Special teams was a disaster tonight. I mean, we saw a lot of punts from Syracuse because the offense couldn't execute, but you have Trevor Pena fair catch the ball at the 5-yard line and catch the ball, which leads to a punt. Florida State gets the ball at midfield, right? Syracuse helps them advance even further with a face mask penalty. They score a play later. I mean, that was just everything encapsulated with what was wrong with this game. And even on that play, Johnny Wilson scores for Florida State. Deuce Chestnut's got him wrapped up, lets him slip out of his hands. I mean, nothing went right. Nothing went right in this game. So I know you guys are going to come hot and heavy with the comments. I'll start to highlight them as we go here. David just wraps it up pretty well there. Sad, very sad. It was pretty pathetic, to be honest with you. That's the word that really comes to mind for me, a no-show performance for Syracuse in this one. As you guys are getting some frustrations out on this, that's what we're here for. That's why we do these post-game shows. Sometimes they're happy occasions. This certainly will not be a happy occasion tonight. So I'll highlight a few more of your comments. You guys can go at it here and tell me what you think about this one. I'll give you some numbers from this one coming up here. And now, look, how does Syracuse salvage this thing? Injuries have piled up. That does have to be factored into the conversation. But to just get steamrolled by Florida State tonight is bewildering to me. This is an offense that has not scored a touchdown in 8 quarters. They have not scored a touchdown in the month of November at this point. 8 straight quarters, haven't scored a touchdown since the 4th quarter against Notre Dame, couple games back at the JMA Wireless Dome. And yeah, you had Carlos Del Rio Wilson in last week against Pittsburgh. We didn't see him until about 3 minutes to go. Like, even at the last play, Rich brings it up here about Dino's clock management. Like, even the last drive, they're coming down the field and they can't manage a timeout. They can't manage enough time on the clock to put a touchdown on the board to at least snap the touchdown void they've been in for 8 quarters. And they can't get a playoff on the 1-yard line with 1 second remaining, like right down to the bitter end. Everything went wrong for this team tonight. So you guys keep going at it there, as Dale says here, and says pretty pointedly, they got spanked. And they did get spanked by, a good Florida State team, a team that's now ranked and won 3 in a row. But it was hard to read Florida State in a way, considering that they had beaten Georgia Tech and Miami in recent weeks. Both teams playing backup quarterbacks. Both teams just having seasons falling apart. Miami got a big win over Georgia Tech, as a matter of fact, today. But, that was kind of questionable how Florida State won those games. Not questionable how they ran all over Syracuse tonight. So Syracuse has now given up 930 yards in 4 straight games on the ground alone. That's just rushing yards. We knew that Florida State could run the ball, and run the ball they did in this one. So Florida State had 420 total yards on 71 plays. Syracuse ran 48 plays for 160 yards. I believe that's the second straight game that Syracuse has run 48 plays. I'm pretty sure they only had 48 against Pittsburgh as well. So 2 straight games, they finish with less than 50 plays. Syracuse was 1 of 11 on third down. I mean, you can't even put into words how bad that is. Syracuse with just 160 total yards, 65 through the air, 95 on the ground. We mentioned the penalties. They had 10 penalties for 72 yards in this game. Syracuse averaged 3.3 yards per play, whereas Florida State averaged 5.9. How about running the football? Florida State averaged 5.8 yards per rush. Syracuse 3.1 per rush. And on down the line you go here. Things pretty bad for the Orange. Jordan Travis was 21 of 23 for 155 yards. He threw 3 touchdowns. He rushed for a touchdown. He caught a touchdown. And, man, Florida State rubbed the salt in the wound in the Salt City tonight when they ran the Philly special to go up 38-3. And that ended up being the final score of this game. But, man, that just put some salt right in the wound there. Travis catching the ball. Trey Benson has been the ACC running back of the week 2 weeks going. He'll be in contention for it again. He had 163 yards on 18 carries. He averaged 9 yards a carry on the night. He was the star for Florida State. Running the ball, mixed bag. Receiving, Syracuse, even when Sean Tucker ran the ball tonight, guys, he had 14 carries for 52 yards. He could have been the lone bright spot for this team, but there were 3 occasions where he broke off a big run, had to come back for holding, right? And what a way for the seniors to go out, right? This is senior night. They're doing the senior lap at the JMA Wireless Dome after the game here, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of fans left for them to greet. A lot of fans left and fled from this one. If anything, Florida State fans took over the place late in the game, and it became their building. So I hate to say it, but there's not a lot of fans that are going to be left at the Dome to do the senior walk tonight. They got honored before the game, and family and friends, I'm sure, will stick around. There'll be some people there to greet them, but that senior walk is not going to be a popular one tonight just because of how the game went. It's a late night game. And, unless you're a real dedicated fan that wanted to stick around and say goodbye to 11 players who are going to make the walk tonight, some seniors, a couple of upperclassmen, but not necessarily seniors, Matthew Bergeron included. And look, that speaks to the fact, look, this is a team that's got NFL talent in Sean Tucker and Matthew Bergeron and Michael Jones, who are all Tucker is not walking, but Bergeron and Michael are planning to walk out there tonight. And this team's going to have 4 or 5 guys drafted in April at the very least. A number of guys in NFL camps, if some don't get picked, Andre Schmidt included, who was a senior and will do the senior walk as he is out of eligibility, right? And they're still getting rolled, and they're still looking as bad as can be in a game like this. And you just have to think to yourself, how can they possibly salvage this thing? How do you come back from this? You got a banged up quarterback. You got a team that opposing teams focus in on the running back and slow him down. And even when he breaks out some runs, you got penalties on the offensive line. That's the biggest problem we got to talk about, guys. Not that Dino's play calling is anything to write home about. Robert and I, all of a sudden, not the offensive guru maybe we thought he was. It's the offensive line. This line in the past few games has just fallen apart. There has been an injury or two there. Kalen Ellis, notably, who left the game in the fourth quarter again, but they can't block anybody. They cannot produce enough holes for Sean Tucker. Even when they do, there's penalties. What has happened to Mike Schmidt's unit? This was a unit that was nominated for the Joe Moore Award, one of 20 units in college football nominated to be the best offensive line in college football. They have completely fallen apart the last 4 games. And it's not like in prior years where it was a mismatch of lineups and different guys in there and tons of injuries. This is not a unit that has had a ton of injuries that have knocked players out. There's probably some guys with the owies, as Dino Babers likes to say, But man, that offense, if you don't have an offensive line, you have nothing. And Syracuse in the trenches generally has just been rocked in these past few games. I brought up the rushing yards, 930 rushing yards in the last 4 games, starting with Clemson and Will Shipley, Notre Dame with the 2-prong attack. Pitt didn't even have their best running back in the game, Izzy Abanikanda. They rushed for 161 yards. And what was the number Florida State ended up with? 230 rushing yards tonight for Florida State. It's just, I don't even know what I can say about this. If they do finish 6-7, as Dale notes here, to lose 7 in a row, if they lose a bowl game, by the way, if they finish 6-6, they still go to a bowl game, that would be a 6-7 loss, including the bowl game. I mean, what do you say about that, right? There has been a situation. Paul Pasqualoni was fired after Syracuse made a bowl game in 2004. They go to the Champ Sports Bowl after a 6-6 season, and they got rocked by Georgia Tech in that Champ Sports Bowl. As a matter of fact, Paul Pasqualoni was fired at halftime of that game. Not officially, but the decision was made at halftime. And that was a new athletic director, right? John Wildhack's been on the job here for 6 years now and has said Dino's not on the hot seat. And, by qualifications, how many times do you fire a coach that goes to a bowl game? But if they keep losing down the stretch here, and if they continue to show some of the ineptness here, like it's on the table. Do I think Wildhack's going to do it? No, but how could you not at least consider it? I mean, you're going to lose the fan base here. You're going to lose everybody if this continues at this rate. Brent, let's see, from David, you come back from this by changing up the script. They need to do something new. They're exposed. I don't really disagree with you there, David. The problem is, what can you do with that offensive line? You got to have an offensive line to change it up, to do new things, to try. I mean, Robert and I, where have you gone, Robert and I? I mean, it's limited what he can do play calling wise when you don't have an offensive line. But all of a sudden, a lot of the pre-snap motion, a lot of the creativity in the offense, a lot of the things that sparked this team early on has just evaporated. And that has a lot to do with Garrett Schrader, of course, who's limited out there, who came back from injury this week. He clearly he certainly looked better mobility-wise than he would have if he played last week. But, man, he was lost, and he was under pressure and, made some bad decisions in the RPO game this week. And, he tried to get back in there after being out for a week and get back in the flow of things. Obviously, it didn't come to fruition. How many punts did we see tonight? Let's see. We pull up the numbers here. Max von Marburg, 8 punts, 332 yards. The punter had 332 yards in this game, averaging 41 yards per kick, which is actually pretty good. He's struggled in recent games. But anytime your punter has 332 yards and your offense has 160, I mean, what more do I have to say about that? I am just bewildered how bad they played in this game. I really am. I mean, losing to Pitt was one thing. Clemson and Notre Dame just ran over this team. They're just much better talent-wise. Pitt was kind of that WTF game where just nothing goes right. Your offense was pathetic, even though your defense was great. This game, it was worse. They dug the hole deeper in this one, and they had some key guys back that weren't there a week ago, as Rob's comment is there. Andrew thinks it's time to blow it up and start over. Josh agrees, right? And this is back on the table. I mean, think how this completely dissipated. I wrote a column saying that talk had dissipated, talked about it on this show when they were 6-0. Like, okay, now that we know Dino's coming back, how do you advance forward? I don't even know if you can say that anymore. I don't think I would be genuine here if I didn't say that's not on the table. Now, I think they'd have to lose out for that to be on the table, including the bowl game, for John Wildhack to even consider that. But the fact that that's on the table now, and that's even in the conversation after we saw this team start 6-0, just shows you how bad it's been in the last 4 games. And you go from there, right? I mean, Andy says Dino's going to be fired tomorrow. He's not going to be fired tomorrow, Andy. They're not going to do that. But if they lose out, I mean, that is certainly going to end up on the table. As Joel notes here, Syracuse is going to end up 6-6 and in the Pinstripe Bowl and get rolled by a physical Big Ten team. Don't forget the Fenway Bowl is in consideration this year as well. So which cold weather bowl game will Syracuse be going to? At the very least, they're going to a bowl game. Last year they finished 5-7 and they're sitting home in December. You don't get the extra practices. You don't get the things you need to develop next year. And, somebody brought it up earlier in the comments. LaQuint Allen got in for 6 carries and 38 yards tonight, right at the end at garbage time there. Where's LaQuint Allen? And I hate to say it because it's not Sean Tucker's fault, but you can't put everything on his shoulders. Somebody brought up, you got to switch things up and try things differently. I mean, that passing game tonight, 65 yards, 65 passing yards. I mean, Florida State's got Jared Verse, the transfer from Albany, good, speedy defense, but it was just too easy for those guys out there. They toyed with Syracuse all night long. We brought it up. Offense was pathetic. Defense missed tackles all night. Travis goes up and down the field. Benson running the football, missing tackles. Special teams missing tackles. The Pena fair catch. Andre Schmidt missed a 53-yard field goal. Even in the dome, that's not an easy kick to make. It just, from start to finish, the first possession, Syracuse goes 3 and out. They pass 2 out of 3 times. Schrader's under pressure, and Florida State marches right down the field and scores. And you said to yourself right there, this is not good. Florida State goes up 14-0. Syracuse couldn't even make do. They had a turnover at one point. Let me go to my notes here just to kind of go back to this. So it's a 3rd and 16. Garrett Schrader is sacked. That's followed by a big loss by Tucker. Jared Verse comes in and gets the sack. Okay. Syracuse just yaks away great field position. Andre Schmidt misses a 53-yard field goal, but then Travis is stripped. Syracuse recovers. Derek McDonald knocks the ball out. Justin Barron recovers it. Great field position. They don't cash it in, right? Not that it would have mattered, just would have been a 38-10 score as opposed to 38-3, the way that it was. But it was just that kind of night. Nothing went right. And for that lack of emotion to be there, that lack of preparedness to be there, that lack of anything to be there on senior night. These guys talked all week about wanting to send the seniors and the players that are going to move on out with a bang, and they went out with a whimper. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but that's what happened tonight. So your comments coming hot and heavy here. Let me jump back in here and highlight a few of these. As Jim notes here, watching ACC Network postgame coverage live from the Dome. Syracuse getting ripped apart by the crew. Dave Pasch, air has gone out of the Dome and out of the program. Dave Pasch is not on that broadcast, but did Dave tweet that or something on another broadcast? Maybe did they go to Dave for another game? Because Dave Pasch is not on that broadcast, but I don't doubt that Dave would have said that. Dave's a pretty honest guy, even for an alum, and certainly knows what he sees. Josh says it's the same old penalties, holding, offsides, legal motion. It's the fundamentals. They're falling apart. John laughs at the notion of extra practices. Maybe they should have less practice from this coaching staff. And I don't know what the exact number is. I think it's 5-20, somewhere around there. That's Dino Babers' record in November. And let me jump in here, because we were looking at some numbers on this, on some big time losses for Dino Babers here. Just give me a second to pull it up, guys, because there are some big numbers here when it comes to big losses, and a lot of them come on the second half of the schedule. A lot of them come in November for this team. Boy, where did I put that note here? Because it's noteworthy what these numbers are. Let me see if I can find it here. So here we go. Syracuse lost 38-3. That's a 30-plus point loss. That's the 11th loss by Dino Babers. 11 losses in his tenure by 30 points or more. 11. Syracuse lost 38-3, so that is also a loss by 21 points or more. So that's 19 of Dino's losses have been by 21 or more points. That's a lot. That's a lot. And again, this is coming from a team that, like a month ago, guys, was in the top 20, went into Clemson with a chance to win that game up in the fourth quarter. And ever since that play, it's just man, I don't believe in curses. I should as a Red Sox fan, for so long cursed, and some of the weird voodoo that's out there in sports, some unexplained things. But ever since that sideline play against Clemson and the late quarterback hit and then not getting it on the other end against Garrett Schrader, this team has completely fallen apart. I mean, that's where you plant the flag. That's where you mark the tape of where things went sideways for this team. And they've lost 4 since then, right? Cody says bright side that Tommy DeVito lost today. I don't know why he'd be rooting against Tommy DeVito. I'm pretty happy for Tommy and that he's found success somewhere else. Purdue went out there and got him. How about this, guys? Connecticut won today. That's 6 wins. They're bowl eligible. Connecticut beat Liberty. So in retrospect, the weird thing is that Connecticut is actually one of Syracuse's better wins. Louisville lost to Clemson, but Louisville ended up being a better team than we thought. I mean, they're 6-4, but the way things were going with them, they looked like they were going to have a losing record. So that's a decent win, right? Connecticut ends up being a good win, a bowl-eligible team. Obviously, Wagner's a garbage win and shouldn't even be on the schedule, frankly, a team like that. Purdue and Virginia, both close games. NC State was a great win at the Dome. NC State has kind of stumbled down the stretch here. They lost today to Boston College, as we noted, but there were some quality wins in there. And this was a team that was navigating close games. Did it against Purdue, get it at Virginia, obviously is, a losing team. And boy, Brennan Armstrong threw 2 pick sixes to start the game today for Virginia. So they're really having a bad season, but they won those games. And then they beat NC State. And it's just, man, it was all set up for them. Had Clemson on the ropes, would have been 7-0 had they beat Clemson. Now we're talking about a 6-4 team that has just completely come apart at the seams. And this is a continuing pattern here. This is what happens under Babers in November. And I just don't, I get it because I see it. I see the trends and I see the numbers, but no matter what, it seems this team just wilts in the month of November. And they got 2 games to go here, but how can you see this team keeping pace with Wake Forest, who can score at will, who can go up and down the field with anybody in the country? Sam Hartman's a terrific quarterback. Jordan Travis ate Syracuse's lunch today. What's Sam Hartman going to do? That guy's an NFL quarterback, right? I didn't see the final score. Maybe you guys can update me while we're in here of where North Carolina and Wake Forest ended up. But how the heck is Syracuse going to keep up with that? And even Boston College to finish out there. And you're finishing 2 games on the road now. Boston College beat NC State today. Boston College hasn't had a great year overall, but they've been in a lot of close games. They fight you tooth and nail. That's not a rivalry game, but they're familiar with each other, and that's not going to be an easy win for Syracuse by any stretch of the imagination at this point, right? Where this team goes from here is going to be interesting to see at the very least. Maybe they salvage something and get the 7 or 8 wins, and putting a 4-game losing streak behind you is not going to be easy. Think of the teams you lost to. Like when you played real teams with real players in the trenches, you got run over and your offensive line struggled. So as much as Dino Babers talks about the hippos and the elephants and the rhinos, quite literally in this sense, Chris Elmore, one of the seniors departing this team, they still haven't gotten them to the point where they can compete with the big boys consistently. Right? That's still a problem for this team. It's improved in some ways, but it's still a major, major issue, particularly if they lose a couple of guys, right? A couple injuries happen and you get into the depth in the trenches, and we're seeing the result of it. This team gets run over and they can't run on anybody, right? Greg says, in fairness, I think Florida State's very, very good. They did beat LSU. That's a great point, Greg. They beat them earlier in the year. They did lose 3 in a row, and a couple of those were close games. They lost a game to NC State by 2. They frankly should have won. And, they had a little bit of a bump in the road there, but there is a lot of talent on this team. And we're starting to see Florida State really peak here. But is Florida State kind of feasting on some bad teams, right? You got to be fair about that. Miami's a bad team this year. Georgia Tech's a bad team this year. We thought Syracuse was a good team, but obviously they're playing really bad right now. And, Florida State's had the benefit of playing a few teams that are either playing backup quarterbacks or struggling at this point. But there's a lot of talent on that team. And, I give credit to Florida State and how they're playing at this point. A couple more from you guys here. Great stuff as always. John notes that BC found a new quarterback. And thank you, Jim. North Carolina did win that game 36-34. So you had Drake May and Sam Hartman going at it there. By the way, Syracuse has to play Drake May next year. Drake May is not eligible to go to the NFL draft yet. That is because remember, the new ACC scheduling model takes hold next year. So you got to face that guy next year. Good luck with that. Get Sam Hartman next week. How tough is he going to be to stop when this defense could barely stop Jordan Travis today? And I mean, barely. 21 of 23. Not a lot of numbers throwing the ball because he didn't need it. The efficiency was there. This guy was sharp as a tack. 21 of 23, 155 yards, 3 touchdowns through the air, rushes for a touchdown, catches a touchdown on the Philly special play that Florida State ran to just kind of put the nail in the coffin, if you will, and go up 38-3. Oh, baby. Let's see here. Jermaine says, I really hope Schrader's not hurt. I mean, Schrader's hurt. There's no question about it. He was healthy enough to play, but not healthy enough to play well. So do you go with him next week or do you go with Carlos Del Rio Wilson? Carlos Del Rio Wilson is just not ready for prime time. He was overthrowing some receivers in the Pitt game. I think he's got talent. I like his arm strength. He's a big kid. I think eventually he could run this team. And look, Syracuse, to be fair, so you have Carlos Del Rio Wilson, Justin Lamson, who's hurt, but showed maybe he could compete at the quarterback position in the spring game. Lenora Sellers coming in next year is a great quarterback recruit for Syracuse, at least on paper, and by all measures. Tommy DeVito was as well, and ultimately didn't end up working out for Syracuse for a myriad of reasons. But there is some hope in the quarterback room there. But Garrett Schrader, I mean, he's hurt right now, to answer your question, Jermaine, but he could be playing himself off the field at this point if he can't get his game back and get back in this thing. He was hurt at the end of last year, too. Remember, he had the shoulder issue at the end of last year. I mean, he's just been banged up at the end of the season. And this team, everybody has injuries and that war of attrition kicks in, but there's just something about Syracuse. They just literally fall apart at the end of the season in terms of coaching, in terms of injuries, in terms of how they play, how they get outscored in the month of November. And that's just depth. That's an easy thing to explain. That's a pattern there. They just don't have the depth yet. They have talent at certain positions, but you lose a couple of guys in key places, and it just all comes crumbling down. So like we said, they got 2 games to kind of redeem themselves. 8-4 would look pretty good if they can somehow manage to win the last 2 games. But frankly, how do you see that? How do you turn it around, go to Wake Forest next week and compete with a team that can go up and down the field like Wake Forest can? They can grind out and win over Boston College. I can see that. So, what they're looking at here is how do you salvage 7-5? That's what I'm looking at here. If they beat Wake Forest next week, I'd be very surprised. How do you salvage 7-5, beat Boston College, and then go into a bowl game and no matter what, finish with a winning season? That's their task at hand right now. And think about what we were talking about 3 weeks ago. 6-0 football team, and the sky was the limit. Now we're just talking about just get 7 wins and salvage this thing into the bowl game. We'll end on Joel's note here, who says, I'd rather have Carlos Del Rio Wilson out there instead of a compromised Garrett Schrader. Let the kid take his lumps now to potentially be better later. Joel, it was an interesting conversation, an interesting decision that Dino had to make. I felt like this team needed their quarterback back out there if he could play. Clearly, he can't play up to his capabilities. Schrader is so good when he's healthy at taking off and running with the football. He just wouldn't do it. He wasn't willing to do it. He couldn't do it. And especially against a speedy defense like Florida State, they weren't going to let him do it one way or the other. So Syracuse has just become so one-dimensional and easy to play because they have no passing game. They can't throw the football. Sean Tucker, even when he runs the ball, penalties bring him back. Like, it's easy to defend Syracuse right now. They can't get up and down the field. So, like I said, how in the world are they going to compete with Wake Forest next week? Aronde Gatson shut down again, second straight game. He had a couple of nice plays out there, finished with a catch for 29 yards. Damian Alford, 2 catches for 17 yards, 2 catches for 23 yards on the day. Trevor Pena, 1 catch for 10 yards. Schrader, 6 of 16, 65 yards. Like, what are we talking about here? This offense has gone into a black hole, and they've got to find their way out of it. And, once you fall in a black hole, there's no getting out of it. So they got to find a way to do it one way or the other here just to be competitive in these final 2 games. Rough night for the Orange, to say the least, friends, and on senior night, too. I feel bad for those seniors and those upperclassmen to have to go out like this, but as we noted, 2 games to go, so we will be back here on Syracuse football postgame next Saturday. It's another 8 o'clock kickoff at Wake Forest, so same deal. We'll be here after the game, depending on where you're watching. It just hit midnight here as we speak on the East Coast, but no matter where you are, we'll be here live after the game. If you miss it, it archives on these channels that you're watching. I put the recap of the YouTube clip in my recap on syracuse.com, and you can find it on our social media channel. So always can go back and watch the show if you do miss it live. Okay, so that's when we'll do football post game. Again, we're not going to do basketball post game Monday night. Maybe if they lose, I'll hop on. So you guys will see a notification and you can hop on the basketball channel. Syracuse basketball playing Colgate Monday night. Hey, Colgate beat them last year. You never know. Orange Weekly airs on these same channels, streams, if you will, on these same channels, Thursdays at noon Eastern time. You can always watch the replay in the same way you watch the replay of this show if you missed that. So a few things to keep an eye on here is football and basketball crossing streams at this point here with 2 games to go in the regular season for football and basketball getting into that rhythm. Thanks for watching tonight. I know it's not a pleasant game to talk about, but that's why we do the post game here, so you guys can come on here and vent a little bit here. The Orange are 6-4. They've lost 4 straight after a 38-3 loss to Florida State. This has been Syracuse football post game presented by Krause Health. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you next time.